Rachel. I work at KU in the NICU as a tech. I've been there for 4 years. I've worked with Jessica once. She came here and she asked me to come tonight. So
My name's Robin Brandon, and I am a neonatal ICU nurse at Solid Overdone in nursing. And I've worked in that field for 17 years now. Worked with Rachel for quite a while.
sure.
And I can see a real need for people to have some wonderful and positive memories of their time in the NICU. So,
Well, I appreciate you guys coming. You guys are going to provide a perspective that I think is needed for sure.
thanks for having us.
Thank you. So I'm Jessica. I've been a professional for 8 years. I'm also going to look at the camera a little bit too, sorry. But I've been a professional for 8 years. I've done NICU photography for 3. I started birth also in 2011. NICU photography I kind of fell into. I was working with Natalie Van Asleep, and after 3 sessions, I couldn't emotionally commit to it anymore. They are saints who volunteer for that organization. And so one of my last sessions they sent me on was a hospice session for a little NICU baby who was going home. And he was 2 months old at the time. They didn't anticipate he was going to live much longer. And then, so I photographed him in the NICU, and it was amazing. Just the bond of his parents and him together. I was like a fly on the wall. I was just documenting them and loving their baby. And he's still alive, and it's been 3 years. So he defied the odds. It was amazing. So after that experience, I kind of let other people know that I really wanted to do this on my own and give this to other people. And so kind of through word of mouth, Facebook, and through one of the nurses that I knew at one of the NICUs, they kind of hooked me up with some families. So I was able to kind of get my feet wet with more families. And then as I continued doing it, my passion really grew for the micro preemies. And the definition of micro is what, under 28? No, 29?
Under
28. 28
weeks usually is when they under lifetime for a micropreemie.
Okay, yeah, they're the itty bitty ones. We're talking like a pound. Some of them not even quite a pound. I just find their survival stories, any story, just absolutely amazing, and what they go through and the way medical technology is developed. I think it's unreal what they can do for these kids. So their parents, I can't even describe what they go through. It's such an emotional roller coaster. And their kids are in the NICU for so long that they miss out on so many moments. And I think that it's important for them to see something that to them can be really chaotic and scary and find the beauty in it. And then that way they can look back on those photos, and instead of remembering their time in the NICU was scary, they can remember their time as, oh my gosh, look how little he was, or she, and how far they've come. So it's kind of, my focus is really on the little tiny guys, because I really love following their stories. This morning, I actually did a follow-up session for a little guy who was born at 23 weeks and 1 day. He's now at 41 weeks gestation, and I didn't even recognize him. He was at 1 pound 11 ounces when I first photographed him, and he was 7'3" today. Total huge difference. It was unreal just to see the difference in him. So that's kind of where I got started. Had a little bit of publicity in the last while. I'm not going to toot my horn, but it's kind of, that was really unexpected. So having that awareness of this need for the photography was my main goal in agreeing to do any media, just because I wanted people to know that there was a need for this and to see the beauty in it. Because a lot of people see the tubes and the cords and they just see it as a really scary environment. And I wanted people to know that, hey, you can do this. You know, I can't do it all myself. Go in there and help and, you know, be someone's hero for the day. So it's just fun. So yeah, so that's kind of where I got my start, and I've had a lot of people ask about it, and unfortunately I don't have a lot of free time to mentor one-to-ones. That's why I wanted to do a group night and then film it, just so people around the country can see it and kind of get an idea of what we're doing. So it's kind of why I put it together. So I'm super glad you guys came. Thank you. So I kind of put together the NICU Photography 101 list that I gave you. Was kind of a little reminder of little rules to go in the NICU. So I'm just going to go through this really quick, and then we're going to pass it over to Rob and Rachel and kind of describe what working in the NICU is like, kind of what the babies are going through. I think it's really important for photographers to understand what the babies are actually going through and why certain things are the way they are, what to expect, being flexible, things change on a daily basis, and just kind of a good knowledge of why you don't use splash, for instance, or why you don't touch them, why you don't bring anything in with you, why you avoid if you're sick, stuff like that. So that's why I brought you guys in, because you're awesome. So I'm gonna go through this real quick. I kind of read it over with you guys. We're gonna have Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions, we're just gonna save them for the end, just kind of mosey on through this. So real quick, so first one is if you're sick or been around anybody who's sick, don't go to the NICU for at least a week to 2, I would say. Would you recommend longer, or what's the general guideline?
I think if you've been around somebody who's sick, it's okay to come in the NICU as long as you're not symptomatic, but you just need to make sure that you have on clean clothes.
Right.
And that you have changed and showered since you've been with them.
I'm so paranoid that I don't even go around there. If I've been around somebody who's sick, let alone a fever, I'm like, no. So most of my clients know if they're sick or their kid is sick, they better reschedule, because I'm in the NICU so much that I don't like being around sick people. And then of course number 2, if you've never been in the NICU, you're gonna have to wash the moment you arrive. NICUs vary on what kind of soaps they use. Did KU go to just the wipes, or is it all the way up still? I can't remember.
We're not asking visitors actually to scrub in
Okay.
anymore even. We're just asking people
wipes.
to sanitize.
Okay.
With a photographer especially, you might want to think about how often you're going to have to sanitize though, because it won't be just when you come in, it'll be if you touch your equipment and then you want to touch something else.
Right.
So it'll constantly be in between your equipment and touching really anything in the baby's environment. So.
Absolutely. Which leads me to use hand sanitizer like it's going out of business.
Yeah.
So all the time. I touch my face, I use hand sanitizer. I touch anything, I use hand sanitizer. Like I pretty much bathe in it. So I have it with me at all times. Another one is we don't handle babies. Only parents and staff. We don't move them. We don't touch them. The most I've ever touched a baby is if mom or dad's holding them and say I want to move their foot, I will ask them if I can do it. If they want to do it, then I let it up to them. But most of the time, I'm hands off. I know there are some photographers who may go in there and think that they need to work with the baby or pose them. Hands off. So basically, you're just going in there to do purely lifestyle. So basically, that's it. So just don't touch them. And if you do need to adjust anything, always ask first, because sometimes parents, they don't want you touching them at all. So parents, absolutely, you have to respect their wishes first. So generally, don't touch them. So the next one is to be aware of your surroundings and where you're standing. If you've never been in the NICU, there are a lot of cords, and so it's very easy to trip over them. So just make sure you're being very aware of where equipment is, where cords are. Don't ever move a cord if you need a cord moved, or you aren't sure if it needs to be moved. Ask the nurse. If it's something that can be moved, you guys will probably see it before we do. But if it's not something that can be moved, then they'll tell you, but don't touch anything. So just don't trip over anything. It's part of the reason why you have liability insurance, whether it's personal liability or business liability, because if you accidentally move and trip, you never know. So it's better to be safe than sorry. So that's kind of why you have to be very aware of what your surroundings are. The next one is to only take your camera bag into the room. I always leave my coat at the check-in, so don't take a lot of extra stuff. Even in the wintertime when we have a lot of extra stuff with us, kind of get off as many layers as you can. Make sure your clothes are clean. Before I go to NICU, I always have a set of clothes that I wear and I wash them so they're nice and fresh. Don't bring any props with you. Pretty much, I use one lens because I don't like to be going in and out of my bag, just because you never know with dust and stuff. So, like I said, I'm really paranoid. So, which is good. That's, you should be paranoid. So don't bring anything in. So, do you have anything to add to that, or pretty much it?
I would say that props are not totally inappropriate if they can be washed.
Okay.
They would have to be freshly washed, preferably in hot water, because
Right.
anybody can do that. I know a lot of times you guys have these little baskets and made little nests for them, and the nurses love to make nests all the time for the babies. So if you have some items that can be cleaned like that,
Okay.
you know, you could maybe make a little basket and just check with the mom and check with the nurse and see if it was appropriate to put the baby in that. So, but it would have to be freshly cleaned. Bring it in a bag.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just so germaphobe that I don't bring anything in. So I'm glad for your insight on that, because other photographers may want to bring something in and other ones don't. So it's totally kind of, I think it needs to be agreed on between mom and dad before you can bring it in. Don't bring it in and then bring it on them, just kind of arrange and email them and text them, be like, hey, I've got this idea, or something like that.
And they might have a blanket.
That's true.
From home to use too. So,
Yeah.
and that's always fine.
Definitely. A lot of parents will have outfits or something that they'll bring in, and that's totally fine, so, for sure. Okay, number 6. This is my big, if you've ever heard me talk about NICU photography, this is a big one. No flash, like ever. Preemies, newborns' eyes are especially sensitive, but especially preemies. They're so sensitive and they can develop ROP and just it's very risky. The flash is so bright and you could damage their eyes, and maybe not you particularly, but if they're constantly flashing, that could really disturb them and it could upset them and could damage their eyes. You just never know. So it's better to be safe than sorry with flash. Always, if there's a window open, you can drop the blinds. If there's lights, if they're off when you go in, always ask the parents if you can turn them on, because you never know. There's some babies who are in the dark for a reason. If the parents are like, yeah, sure, turn it on, that's great. So just always ask first, because you just never know. I've had some babies who, some have had advanced ROP, which I'm going to let you guys explain what that is. So it has to be dark in there. I've had another little guy who he ended up getting glaucoma when he was 1. He was in the NICU for 2.5 years, so he ended up getting glaucoma when he was about 1, so he had to pretty much be in a dark room for most of the time. So it's just really important to be aware of what the baby's needs are. So that's why I say don't use flash. Make sure your camera can handle working in an environment with low light. Birth photographers especially, or you guys are experienced with this. Just so that way, if your camera can handle high ISO without being too grainy, that's great. So just make sure that it's not going to be too shaky and motion if you don't use the flash, so that way your camera can handle it. So before I move on, I'm going to ask you guys to explain what RP is, because I think it's really important to talk about that.
When a baby is born prematurely, the blood vessels are not fully developed on the back of the eye. Nothing is fully developed on the baby, but the blood vessels in the eye develop abnormally a lot of times in response to the amount of oxygen that they're having to be given for whatever medical reason, whatever thing is going on with them. And in the presence of that oxygen, especially if it goes up and down a lot, those blood vessels will begin to grow abnormally, and they can eventually pull the retina off the back of the eye, so they might have to have medical treatment for retinopathy of prematurity is the name of this condition. Usually ambient light in the room itself doesn't really damage them, but if they've had to have laser treatment for the ROP, or if they just have had an eye exam, for example, and they've had their eyes dilated, then they would be extra sensitive to light.
Yeah,
So
for sure. So you agree, no flash?
I agree, no flash, and really probably more for just developmental reasons. I mean, if you think about what environment a premature baby is supposed to be in, there's definitely light, there's definitely sound through the mom's abdomen. You know, even at 30 weeks, they can hear, they can start to recognize voices and songs and everything, but it's much more dim, it's a lot quieter. And when those babies are born early like that, they don't really have the capacity to deal with that stimulation. And so most of what we do in the NICU is just geared towards trying to mitigate the bad stimulation that we have to do. You know, we do have to turn the lights on sometimes to start an IV or whatever. And so we kind of try to keep the lights down when it's appropriate and keep the sound down and everything. And if you have your flash going off over and over, you're not going to get a very good response from the baby. They're going to put their little hands up, or they'll start to cry, or they'll just do what the very early micropreemies do, and they'll just check out. They'll look like they're in a coma.
Yeah.
They'll look asleep, but they won't be there anymore, and you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
It's more them. So
For sure, and that's why you guys have the blankets over the top of the ASLs all the time, right? To keep it nice and dim.
the earlier they are, kind of the darker and the quieter they get. When they hit about 32 weeks, we start to cycle the daylighting, so it's more approximate to what they would experience in Euro. So there will be some light in the room. We'll probably take the blanket off the bed, but it still won't be, lights, camera, action for a while.
Definitely, definitely. So yeah, if you walk into the room and the blanket's on there, always ask first before you just take it off, because there's a reason why it's there.
And I will mention that there is a lot of education involved with the NICU, and sometimes that education does extend to the families too. So mom and dad always have the first say in what goes on with the baby, but they may be in the process of learning what's developmentally appropriate for their baby too. So
That's important.
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sure. All right. So this one is, the next one I want to talk about was being aware of fluorescent lights. This is a technical camera issue that I discovered when it happened to me. So I was shooting, I wasn't even a NICU session, it was just a birth session type. The baby was a day old. And when I got home, I discovered that there was yellow banding on almost all of my pictures. And that drove me insane. I'm like, what is wrong with my camera? Oh my gosh. I threw out like 4 CF cards because I thought they were on bad. It was horrible. Turns out nothing was wrong with my camera. Fluorescent lighting, I don't know if you guys are aware of fluorescent lighting. So the way fluorescent lights work is they actually shoot out color spectrums really, really fast. And our eyes can't see it, but when you shoot faster than 1/60th of a second, the camera sees it. So that's what the yellow banding is. Sometimes it might be other colors, but most predominantly it's yellow. Once you get it on your camera, like once you get on the pictures, you can't get rid of it. So if you shoot an entire session and it's yellow banding, I put it in black and white, so because you won't really get much in color. So after much research, I discovered this, and I realized, okay, avoid fluorescent lights for the most part. They're kind of trouble anyway. I find pot lights are nicer, or just the ambient light from the window. But if you do have to shoot with fluorescent lights, because not all rooms have windows, but if you do have to shoot with them, make sure you're shooting. You want to bump up your ISO and make sure you're shooting slower than 1/6 of a second. That's slow. So you're going to make sure you don't have too shaky hands. You might want to practice on it if you're finding you get a lot of shake, but you'll avoid the yellow lights. So, because your camera is slowing down so that way it doesn't see all of the lights, which is nice. So if you want to learn more about that, there's tons of forums out there, but it is something I learned that, because with NICU stuff, you can't always go back and do it, because you might not be able to get there right away, or just the timing with the family, plus they're already so excited about their photo shoot, you don't want to email them back and be like, so sorry, how did we do it? Because that's just no fun. So that's more of a technical thing that I learned. Just want to pass it on, the yellow banding problem. So avoid fluorescent lights, just makes your life easier. So, all right, next page. Okay, so this one is just trying to remember the details. Most rooms have like whiteboard, I think all rooms have whiteboards with the baby's information on there, the daily weight, baby's names, like everywhere. Parents will personalize the room because the babies are there so long. They'll put up pictures of family or just little, if there's holidays, I've seen like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree one or like a little Easter egg, something like that. So try to capture what's going on in the room, not just of the baby. Don't overdo it. Just do it kind of quickly or incorporate into the pictures with the baby. But if you see their name somewhere, definitely get that because it's their first room, so you want to kind of remember those details. So I do that. But hey, if you miss something later and you're like, oh snap, I forgot it, don't forget it, don't worry about it. So just get what you can, and then the parents will love it no matter what, so no worries. I would recommend keeping your session to about a half an hour. I find, it might go a little longer, it might go a little shorter, but I find half an hour is a really good time. So you're kind of not getting in the way of their daily cares, you're not getting in the way of the nurses, parents can just kind of get excited and then, okay, we're done. They've got enough stuff to deal with. So keep it to about 30 minutes, and then that way everybody's happy. And maybe it might go longer, but if twins, it'll probably be longer, but for singles, keep it about 30 minutes. Would you recommend 30 minutes, probably?
30 seconds.
Yeah, I never want to disturb staff, that's why I'm always like, no, because I don't want to let you guys. So, perfect. Next one is just never charge for them. I've never charged a NICU session. I do it from my heart because I love to love on these families. Sometimes I'll have families be like, what can I give you? What can I pay you? It'll be like, nothing. It kind of gets awkward sometimes when like they're trying to offer you a tip or something. And so I'm like, listen, why don't you just pay it forward to somebody else down the road and just pass the love on? And that's the easiest way to just kind of get out of the awkwardness and just let them know, hey, just do something nice for somebody else. So that's the best way to kind of get around that awkwardness, just because I just don't ever accept money for it, just because they're going through so much, and Lord knows they're going to pay an NICU bill for a long time, so don't take any money for it. Next one is for non-business owners. For liability insurance, check with your homeowners and your or renters insurance. A lot of them will have liability coverage in there for personal liability. If they don't, they'll be like a cheap add-on. I recommend, so if you're doing it for a friend, just check with your insurance and make sure you have something just to be safe. So it's better to be safe than something happen and then not have anything. So that's why I recommend that. For business owners, if you're running a business and you're doing this through your business, you really have to have liability insurance. I go through the Hartford. They're really awesome.